Good afternoon, good afternoon again. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We're going to go through the disclaimers and the trigger warnings. We're going over the exact same thing we just read because I'm going to show you the other side. Basically, in regards to how else, when you're dealing with kids suffering from childhood trauma, what that actually looks like, as opposed to what the JRC is trying to tell you the problem is, and the fact that they think the best way to solve it is more abuse. So, first trigger warning is we're going to be going through some very, very traumatic subjects. In particular, we're going into a little bit more in regards to what the treatment generally is, where people actually need to be going when these types of behaviors, both self-interest and aggressive, how they are normally, usually handled, and what is recommended, as opposed to the JRC's insanity. So we could get a very stark picture in regards to how things should have been handled, instead of sending him back for more abuse and more trauma. And that's separate from the fact that, once again, the JRC seems always to be somehow above the law and are able to be exempt from following the exact same programs and transitions into adult services that everybody else follows. Okay? So, let's get into it. First, we're going to go through the list that the JRC provided us. Then, we're going to take a look at this little article here that I just pulled up. But first, if you are unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign, or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you'll find pertinent links right there in the description box, including Autistic Hoya's massive archive, where we get the bulk of our material in regards to our subject, Neuroclastic's massive article where they interviewed over 800 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's behavior modification program that got so deep under their skin they threatened this poor little non-for-profit just about 3 years old with a defamation lawsuit. They did not remove it from the website. Thankfully, they refused. We got their GoFundMe linked in there as well because, unlike the JRC, we are not shady and do not have access to unlimited resources. So take a look at those. To our trigger warnings, when we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, Agape Boarding School for Boys, or similar like schools or tough love camps, whatever you want to call them, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips or surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, make sure to utilize the headphones. Also, folks, this channel is obviously not marked for children. We do have profanity, and we speak on dark subjects. So if your child is 16 and younger and watching this, very obviously, parental supervision is very much advised. Alright, so I'm going to sift through the victim blaming, very bad attempt at character assassinating, word salad nonsense the JRC put in here. And we're going to talk directly about the symptoms that quote unquote got worse after EL left the facility for the one out in Pennsylvania. Also, again, I want to draw your attention to the fact that this is a process that is absolutely 100% normal when you were in the age range that EL was within that time. In fact, considering when he was first put there, it should have been done way before then. Usually when you hit a certain age range, you are expected to transfer over to adult services, whether that's a full program, whether it looks something a little bit more like mine, where we have community-based services, circle of supports, but whether you are got the final say, you know where we're going there. All right, so we're just looking at the behaviors here and nothing else, okay? Keep in mind what we mentioned in the last video, that all these same behaviors that they're trying to use to demonize this kid are the very exact same behaviors that manifest and are well known within the mental health community for those kids who've survived traumatic childhood abuse. The very exact same. If the JRC's name was nowhere in this, we would all recognize it for what it was, wouldn't we? It's not different just because we're neurodivergent. Do not make me get a bullhorn and put it at full volume, because I'm very tempted. Y'all got no idea. Okay. Okay. Also, I want to mention, but the objections of the family does not matter after they hit a certain age range. Please spare me, Karen. It is normal procedure when you hit a certain age range, even in the best of circumstances, to be transferred to the appropriate services for your age. That is completely normal. All of us go through it. Literally all of us. Mine is a lot more hands-off, mainly because I worked with some of, in my opinion, the best people on planet Earth, and I found a lot of my healing through the service program by the encouragement to start becoming a part of the disability rights and neurodivergent rights movement. If I could tell you the defining thing that changed everything, the whole trajectory of my life, that was it. That was it. Okay? Somebody chisel it on my tombstone. Right underneath, write about how I don't care about your feelings. Nah, don't worry about it. I'll get my brother to do it. Okay. Now that I'm done being morbid, let's get here. Okay, here we are. Self-injury and aggression increased. Regularly violent and dangerously self-abusive. Stop eating and use your proper hygiene. Ritualistic behavior became more intense, more of a crutch. This was especially true for me. It's still true to a large extent, but there was a point in my life where anything that messed with the routine, anything at all, it was just dead in the water. I would not be able to function enough to get myself back up the stairs to put my ass to bed until the next day. Couldn't function if one little thing went wrong. I can't tell you. So that's pretty normal. Withdrawn, yes. Those of us who have been abused are not the biggest types of social butterflies in the world. Although I have seen two effects in regards to childhood trauma on how that's addressed. We're either super outgoing to the point of it being almost extremely strange, to being more like myself and completely withdrawn, which remained how I was for a lot of years until like the very last 2 years of high school, when I finally started to come out of that. Were speaking to family or staff? If your family is the cause, directly or indirectly, for the traumatic shit that you just went through and got out of, I don't think it would be high on anybody's priority list to carry on speaking with them as though nothing happened. You're either going to go quiet or you're going to want to go on the attack, either physically or, in my case, verbally. I had a very unforgiving acid tongue, especially from 19 years old to 23. Yeah. He would attack Melmark's staff, hit his own head against walls, including a brick wall. Hey, I've been there. I have done that. Seems years ago now. It's so weird that I'm 40. It just doesn't feel right, but then there's some things that I read through stuff like this and the things I used to do self-injuriously, and then it seems far away. It's weird. Age is weird. Sorry. Admitted to the emergency rooms because of self-injury, dehydration, refusal to eat. Again, these are many things that those of us who go through childhood trauma experience and or inflict upon ourselves. Whether the child is neurotypical or neurodivergent doesn't really matter. Those types of behaviors are extremely recognizable if you've either gone through them yourself or if you've worked in the field in helping us go through and heal from that level of trauma. Okay? So, if you notice, I highlighted this specifically right here. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up the article here. It's called A Paradigm Shift, Relationships in Trauma-Informed Mental Health Services. This is what EL actually needed. We're going to read through the summary here, and we're going to go over a little bit of the types of people that should have been brought in to his circle of support. Because want to know where my trauma therapist was? It wasn't a separate treatment that I sought outside of my regular treatment program. It was grafted in. So everybody in that circle of support, why it's called that, is everybody was informing everything else. Everybody was on the same page. Everybody knew what was going on. Everybody helped each other. It gave everybody a full picture, which is vital when you're dealing with treatment programs, plans, community-based services. Anyways, trauma-informed approaches emerged partly in response to research demonstrating that trauma is widespread across society, that is highly correlated with mental health, and it is a costly public health issue. The fundamental shift in providing support using a trauma-informed approach is to move from thinking what is wrong with you to considering what happened to you. This article, authored by trauma survivors and service providers, describes trauma-informed approaches to mental health care, why they are needed, and how barriers can be overcome so that they can be implemented as an organizational change process. It also describes how past trauma can be understood as the cause of mental distress for many service users, how service users can be re-traumatized by trauma-uninformed staff, and how staff can experience vicariously the server's users' trauma and can themselves be traumatized by practices such as restraint and seclusion. See what we're talking about here? Well, but he's attacking the staff. Is it making sense yet? You feel that threat. I've always called it the sword of Damocles. It's just taken many different times. So I like the phrase, but it does feel like there's usually more than one sword of Damocles over my head at different points in time. But yeah, what that means is if some situation sends me into a flashback or triggers me to act in a way that I would have when I was going through the trauma at the time, I do not recognize the people who are around me in the moment. I am hallucinating that that person that is trying to restrain me from damaging myself, not as themselves doing their job, but as my abuser who is coming back to hit and abuse me and sexually assault me more. And so, because of that, that is an attack. Or I try to fly from you. That's what's going on. It's not, I'm just becoming worse, kids. That's what autism do. You're just violent and out of control for no reason. Read this, JRC. Don't just read it, but understand. You cause these kids the trauma that is producing the ever increasing and intensifying behaviors that you are using as justification to bring them back to your hellscape and inflict more abuse on them. And because society is very ill-informed in regards to those of us who are not just neurodivergent, but have also suffered some form of trauma in one way or another, and because of that, they are manipulated by bad actors into sending us to places like this or putting us back into places like this. It's a never ending self-destructive circle of sock. Okay? Just say. Alright. Let me go ahead and continue. Trauma-informed mental health care offers opportunities to improve service users' experiences, improve working environments for staff, increase job satisfaction, and reduce stress levels by improving the relationships between staff and patients through greater understanding and respect and trust. So, essentially, we're not going to go through the whole thing. This is more kind of direct care staff informing, which I'm glad to see there. It's become a lot more prevalent in the last few years as more and more people are starting to notice that although mainstream ABA is not quite as out there and in your face as what the JRC is, it is every bit as emotionally abusive and traumatic in its own way. It's become more and more necessary for people to jump in this particular field within the mental health field. A field within a field. Okay? So, generally what this means, when you are having kids, in regards to issues like this, what you are looking for is a trauma therapy counselor, psychologist, or psychiatrist. People who specialize specifically in regards to either adult, those of us who have survived sexual assault, those who specialize in dealing with those of us with psychological mental health issues caused by trauma. Okay? So, for all the things we just read here, the way that is usually handled when these behaviors come up and are more manifested and you can clearly see them, and it's a situation like this where EL has been moved to this residence and they are not equipped with the proper supports and services that he needs due to the issues that are bubbling up because of the trauma, he would receive a referral to start maybe looking into a residential program that has more of a focus in regards to helping to deal with that level of trauma. Or out here, it's more of a marriage, if you, as it were. So it would be a combination of staying within the residential program for the supports and needs that they can already cover, but also you are bringing in, as part of the team, part of your circle of support, you're bringing in those experts in regards to dealing with these very things we're talking about here, to deal with those behaviors that are coming out because of having survived that trauma. This is how everybody else does it. We don't send them back to the program that caused the trauma so that they can inflict more abuse and cause them to shut down and mass again until they can no longer hold it and the cycle continues. But we bring in the folks who specialize in the areas that we or that residential program don't, so they could provide those supports and services to help the kid begin to work through the trauma. You're not seeing any of that being recommended, mentioned, or alluded to in any way, shape, or form when you are reading this victim blaming word salad from hell. Do you? At no point does the JRC admit to the trauma that they caused EL or accept any responsibility in regards to, once he left the program, that these behaviors that are very easily recognizable as things that manifest due to having gone through trauma, that they are responsible for it. Their idea is it's the DC District of Columbia that is responsible because they've removed EL from the abuse, not the JRC for administering the abuse that caused EL's trauma that is bringing out these more dangerous behaviors. Nor are they addressing how, within the usual setting within this field, how this is handled. I think it speaks very loudly, don't you? It also debunks all the bullshit that they're trying to say here, blaming people from removing the kid from the abuse when the behaviors start to manifest themselves as they do with any of us who's gone through horrific trauma in our lives. Instead of blaming the people who put him through the trauma, they want to send him back there. Or to put it more bleakly, they don't want to solve the problem. They want to slam it behind the closed doors, lock it up till no one can ever see it again, and force this kid to literally become a robot so that the JRC can continue to make $285,000 a year off of him until the end of his days. and the parents can pat themselves on the back because they get to see what they want to see. There's a lot of blame to go around in this situation. Massachusetts failed this man. His parents failed this man. The service system failed this man. The federal government has failed this man. It is failure up and down the board, and the only person who didn't fail is poor EL himself. I said what I said. I'm here all day, JRC. I'm bored and I got nothing to do. Try me. We're going to close on that, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. Please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time. As always, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I will see you again here in a few minutes. Bye-bye, everyone.